I knew two things for sure. The mead was way too strong, and one of the guests had been dead for 7 years. Winter in Norway doesn't ask permission. It just shows up like that cousin who promises, just crashing for the night, and by spring has left his coat by your fireplace with, might need it later. In Skelvik, we're used to it. Grain bins that look like they've been through a mouse barbecue, caught hanging in rows like victory banners, and mead barrels lined up so perfect you'd think we sold honesty by the gallon. The Yule feast is officially a solemn occasion, and unofficially impossible to skip. Everyone shows up, even the ones you last saw at their own funeral. That night in 948, the longhouse was so warm the walls smelled like pine tar, sweat, and promises. Grease from the roast ran across the tables, spoons clinked, horns slammed down, and people argued about the important things whose axe was sharper, whose shield was wider. Kids ran wild until they were wrangled onto benches. The dogs slept under the table, but kept one ear open for meat. Everything was fine until two extra men appeared at the far end of the table. One was tall and thin as a spear, with a face like a rock had been asked to make a man, but keep it cheap. The other was short and heavy-set, hands like gnarled roots, eyes like deep water where no one fishes, because something else already has. They ate slowly, politely, without looking up. We don't spook easy around men who can use both a knife and a spoon. But there was one problem. Nobody invited them. Hey, Joran the blacksmith, built like his own anvil, leaned over to me. The short one's my cousin. Your living cousin or your buried cousin? The buried one, he admitted, taking a long drink. But at least his appetite's back. The laugh that followed was crooked, like wind sneaking around a fence. We're not superstitious. We just keep careful records of anything that might bite us later. The elder stood, cleared his throat like he was about to argue with the gods, blessed the table, and rattled off the ancestors as fast as the food was coming. The uninvited didn't flinch. No smile, no nod, no bless you for the man who sneezed like he'd swallowed half the winter. Just a spoon, returning to porridge slow and steady. By the third round of mead, the tall one lifted his cup. Drinking's a fine thing, it keeps the peace. But steam rose from his cup. The mead was ice cold. I'd poured from the same barrel, and my fingers still ached from it. The steam didn't drift lazily like from warm bread. It climbed in thin, straight streams, like breath on a frozen morning. I thought, best case, the cup's warm. Worst case, the man is. I kept that to myself. Harold, braver the drunker he gets, elbowed Torvald, who cracked, guess stranger's mead is always hotter, and promptly got smacked with a towel by his wife. Laughter came back for a moment, horns clinking, meat sizzling, songs starting on one note and ending on a third. But at the far end of the table, it still didn't feel like winter. Then I saw the dog. She gave their seats a wide berth, like something had been spilled there that no one wanted to touch. She pressed herself against my boots and sighed like she was auditioning for Dead Dog of the Year. I scratched her ears and decided not to ask her opinion. The elder pretended it was all part of the plan on Yule. The ancestors sit closer. Hard to argue with a man who's got the beard, the title, and the last slice of honey pie. He raised his horn, made a speech, friendship, peace, greetings to the gods, and don't let the cows out. Someone added, and the goats, and everyone nodded, because our goats think they're birds, mostly by getting on the roof. And then they sang. Not loud, more like singing was chewing, and the words were bones to pick clean. The tall one's voice came from a distant shore where fires burned, but no one stood near them. The short one's was hoarse, like an old wolf trying to remember how to growl. Nobody knew the words, but we all knew they were words. Not stand or sit, but something closer to remember, or remember me, or we remember you, even if you've forgotten. The hearth fire swayed like a drunk swearing he's sober. The wind outside stopped as if told to stay. You could hear mead pouring into horns, and the ragged breathing of someone who'd just been told their garden sat on the graves of small gods. Someone stood too fast, the bench squealed, and it was the most alive sound in minutes. Brother, Joran said, if it's really you, how's the view from the hill? Is the ground soft? No answer. Just the slow scrape of a fingernail on wood, long enough for the table to remember. The short one's nails were too long for a working man's and too clean. The elder tried to lighten things with a story about his grandfather drinking water all night by mistake. He was the only one laughing. For a moment, it felt like the whole room had shifted, not the house, but us. We were the soft part of the world, waiting for the hard part to decide what to do with us. Then a kid squeaked after dropping a spoon, and that tiny sound stitched the silence shut. The world remembered to keep going. Everyone exhaled, even me. Later that night, when the songs had deflated like ale-less bellows, and all that was left was creaking benches and the dream of someone else taking out the trash, the uninvited were gone. No one saw them stand, walk past the fire, or brush a shadow. They just stopped being there. Where the tall one sat, the table had a neat rectangle of frost, like a plate for cold. Where the short one had been, a damp ring smelling of moss and swamp, the kind of swamp where silence outlives heroes and songs. They shut the door, at least, someone asked. If they did, it was from the inside. Someone else answered. Laughter tried to come out, but came out crooked. In the morning, we checked the scene. Snow outside was smooth as a sober man's logic, no tracks. But along the wall, a thin black trickle of meltwater, like someone had stood there and waited. In it, the shape of a hand. Too big to be human, too perfect to be an accident. And under the wall, in the windless dry, a strip of frost, sharp as the print of cold lips on a cup. Ancestors, said old Einar, like he'd invented the past. Nonsense, muttered Harold, nursing 2 fresh bruises from his wife. Someone spilled mead, or water, or consciousness. Consciousness doesn't smell like moss, I said. That ended the conversation. The elder had it written down. 2 uninvited, saying 8 vanished. Handprint, like a giant's, or a tree trying to be a hand. The priest said it happens when the wall between worlds thins. The women exchanged glances. Our walls are solid. But let's put Juniper at the door. And salt. And skip the cat, just salt. That day the dog stuck to me like a shadow, giving me the look of someone who knows you're about to repeat a bad idea. When the sun nudged the horizon and thought better of rising, we lit the fire again. I caught myself wishing someone would sneeze, loudly, humanly, just to prove we were alive. And then, from the far end of the long house, came a faint clink like a spoon against porcelain. We all decided it was a draft. Problem was, there was no draft. I went to look. On the bench where the tall one had sat was the same cup, the one that had steamed. On its rim lay the thinnest frost, the kind silver gets from breath if breath has habits. I touched it, the cold took offense and fled to the edge. What do you think? The elder asked, standing close enough for a whisper to have called him. I think the mead's good, I said, and the guests are polite. They come quietly, leave without fuss, and tidy up after themselves. And leave just a little more winter. If you ask me who we invited, I'll tell you no one. They found their own way. Some guests are just more polite, no-name, slow eaters, gone when the song ends. They leave little things for monks to write down: a strip of frost, a smell of moss, a handprint the size of a small fear. Years from now, one of our cups will sit in a Bergen display case. The curator will tell people it's just metal and glass, carefully avoiding the corner where, in the evenings, the glass frosts over as thin as a whisper. He'll check the doors twice before leaving, sometimes 3 times.
And if you think that's the end, you're almost right. Because real stories end when you stop listening. And back then, the doorway song hadn't been sung yet. The fire hadn't gone out on its own. And the dog hadn't slept in the spot she always left empty. That came later.
That first night, when the mead was too strong and one guest was far too dead, we did the smartest thing the living can: threw on more firewood, took another drink, and laughed louder. Just in case. So whoever was listening in the dark would know we've got plans till spring. And we remember, but we don't call. Not yet. Morning arrived with no manners whatsoever, slipping through the cracks in the longhouse, poking sunbeams straight into the eyes of people who'd sworn they were just staying a while, and exposing whatever the night had tried to hide. On the bench by the hearth sat a cup rimmed with the thinnest frost, like a silver mustache on an old man's face. The dog was parked next to it, pretending the cup didn't exist, wearing the look of someone who'd signed a contract to never get near the unexplainable. People were waking up one by one. Someone went looking for their boots and found another man's wife, meaning her look. Someone else tried to remember exactly when they'd promised not to drink on Yule, and why that had ever seemed funny. Joran the blacksmith emerged from the stables, carrying the scent of honest work and horse philosophy. Harold was insisting the bruise on his cheek was a mystical mark, only to be corrected immediately. Mystical means it can't be proven. Your wife's tell is proof. I stepped to the doorway to breathe air nobody had used yet. Snow by the door was smooth as a sober man's reasoning, and along the wall still ran that thin black trickle of meltwater. Yesterday's handprint was still there, too big, too perfect. The song from last night was gone, but the signature remained. I didn't touch it. Around here, if something looks like it might look back at you, you don't pet it the wrong way. By midday, the yard was back to its normal arguments. Chickens arguing with the wind, goats arguing with the chickens, women clanging pots, men clanging opinions. Someone had hung a bunch of juniper above the door. The smell was woodsy and just a little smug. A line of salt had been poured along the threshold for order's sake, though around here order usually comes from a loud voice and a heavy frying pan. The elder called us to the fire. His voice was the kind you use when talking to an entire century and not wanting to wake it. Old Einar settled next to him, a man who loved history so much that sometimes it loved him back. He straightened his spine, smoothed his beard, and spoke the kind of sentence that usually leads to new pages in the chronicles. Listen to the legend of the winter singers. We listened. Even Harold, whose attention lives next door to his patients, and the two are always visiting each other. In the old years, Einar began, when you could still meet gods if you walked far enough and stubbornly enough, and people remembered the names of their great-grandmothers, there was a rule: never call the ones who love the cold more than they love songs. They're called winter singers. They're polite. They come only where they've been invited, loudly or carelessly. What do you mean, carelessly? Someone asked from the back. It's simple, Einar nodded. Leave an empty seat at the table and fill a cup invited. Say the name of someone long buried, and do it over mead and music invited. Sing their melody invited. Knock 3 times in silence, also invited. They don't break down doors. They come in where they're expected. We didn't expect them, Joran muttered. You set a place for them, Einar said calmly. Yule is generous. Generosity is almost a doorbell. I felt a few glances slide toward me. Last night my tongue had been faster than my thoughts. It's uncomfortable when your mouth is a carrier pigeon and you're not sure who it delivered to. How do you spot them? Asked Harold's wife, a practical woman armed with a towel. By their manners, said Einar. They eat quietly, drink evenly, don't argue, don't laugh, sing low. Steam rises from their cups. Frost clings to where they sat. The dog avoids them. And most of all, after their song, fire listens worse. It forgets it's supposed to be fire. And if they've already come, the elder asked, don't raise your cup to them. Don't top your cup to theirs. Don't repeat the melody. And never invite them a second time. The second time, they're not guests anymore. What happens the second time? Harold couldn't resist. Silence, Einar said. The kind where you can hear your thoughts freezing. He paused, then glanced at the salt by the door with approval. Salt, good. Juniper, good. Put an iron nail under the threshold. And keep a coal alive, even a tiny one. Fire loves us when we love it back. Nobody admitted it, but we all felt lighter with a to-do list. When you've got something to put under your door, the unknown feels just a little smaller. The day spilled into chores, stuffing moss into cracks, checking the roof, fixing latches, dragging old nets out of the shed, because nets always help, even if you're not catching fish. I rolled a little log from ash and salt and set it on the windowsill. Looked stupid. Smelled like a solution. By evening, a skinny fur trader from the next village wandered in thin as a good spoon, talkative as two bad knives. He claimed he'd heard that in our valley. They sing so sweet the milk curdles right in the cow. We told him milk was a proud thing and liked to do whatever it wanted. He made a local sign of respect. We're not sure what it means, but it looks polite, spun on his heel, and left like he'd forgotten his wife on the stove. The sun did its usual trick, came out, thought better of it, and the village became a boat again, everyone knowing where to row and where to look. We lit the fire. I sat by the hearth. It crackled the way a good conversation moves in the right direction. The dog lay down with her head on my boot and sighed like an elderly advisor. You catch the words last night? The elder asked, staring into the fire. No, I said honestly, but I caught the meaning. Something like remember, or we remember. Memory's a bridge, he nodded. Bridges go both ways. We sat quiet. I thought how many things get dangerous when they belong equally to us and to them. Mead, warm and cold. Songs alive and dead. Names ours and someone else's. Outside, the village moved through the important business of evening, drowning out songs with children's laughter, whispering love into the draft-free corners, arguing whether you could call a reindeer twice so he'd bring a friend. Joran sharpened his knife with the focus of a man trying to hone his thoughts to the same point. If they come back, he said, I'm not keeping quiet. Good, the elder answered. Just don't invite them. How do you talk without inviting? That, the elder said, is what we'll find out. His beard seemed to think along with him. We split into watch shifts, door, windows, fire, and unofficially Joran. I stepped onto the porch. The air was so clean you could push a boat with it. The sky hung heavy as a shield, stars carved in deep. Along the wall where water had run earlier, there was now only a dry streak. Frost had licked it clean. And then I heard it, a long, low sound, like someone drawing a bow across the thick nerve of the world. At first I thought it was the wind deciding to be a musician, but tonight the wind preferred silence. The sound wasn't outside. It was inside, not the house, but my head, or my chest. It wasn't frightening. It was familiar. I'd heard it last night, paired with another voice, deep, wolfish. I froze. Heartbeat, careful, don't get in the way. Harold leaned out the door. "What are you doing?" "Listening," I said. "To what?" "To what's listening to us." Harold stared into the dark, and being the brave man he thinks he is, decided the best way to deal with the unknown was to make it known. He took his shield, banged it 3 times against the doorframe, and shouted, "Hey, if it's you, don't be shy." I yelped like I'd just been hit with wisdom. The women inside gasped in sync. The elder let out a very clear word usually reserved for the moment when good plans die. 3 times. We had just hung a welcome sign at the door. We froze, like fish trying to be stones. 1 heartbeat. Another. Nothing. Silence is sometimes kinder than noise, but right then I wanted any sound, even a bad one. Harold coughed to disguise the fact that he was still alive and suggested, "Maybe it's just the wind?" "Maybe we're the wind," I said, not sure what point I was making. We went back to the fire, which decided it still liked our company. The elder glanced up at the beams and said quietly, "If they sing again, don't join in. Even if the melody feels simple, especially if it feels simple." We nodded. Simple things are the trickiest: a spoon, a door, a name. Say it 3 times, and it walks right in. The kids were put to bed. One boy, hair always fighting with his comb, asked for a story. Harold's wife told him about a troll afraid of being tickled. He laughed in his sleep, a little medicine in itself. I was drifting when I heard the faintest whisper. The dog's head came up, ears arrowed. The sound wasn't from outside or the hearth. It came from the corner where the old fishing net hung, the one we dragged out just in case. It was a melody. 2 notes. Low and lower still. Gentle, like someone testing if we'd remember. The net swayed slightly, no wind, no draft. A thin crust of frost appeared on one of the wall planks, just enough for any honest monk to later write, not an accident. The dog didn't growl. She held her breath. So did I. Then, from the bedroom, a small voice, still asleep, sang those exact 2 notes. And smiled. The fire in the hearth flinched, like it had just been called by name. Harold's wife and I locked eyes, and I nearly laughed from sheer helplessness. Sometimes humor is the only tool when you don't have a shield big enough. "Remember," I whispered to myself, "but don't invite." The net stilled. The frost slumped slightly, like an old man settling onto a bench. The boy rolled over and became just a child again. 1 leg stuck out, a funny spike of hair on his forehead. We breathed. The house breathed. And then soft, polite 3 knocks at the door. Tap, tap, tap. This time we said nothing. Not even Harold. Not even me. The fire pretended it had always loved being fire. The dog rested her head back on my boots and didn't move, as if she knew that sometimes the best answer is no answer at all. And if you think that made things easier, you don't understand how invitations work. They're like letters. They don't leave when you write them. They leave when someone reads them. And that night, our letters had been read. And someone's hand was already on the door, testing if it opened from the inside. We didn't answer the 3 knocks. We didn't breathe loudly either. The fire pretended it had always been good at being fire. The dog laid her head on my boot like a paperweight on panic. Nothing else happened. Nothing is never nothing, though. It's the kind of nothing that unpacks itself in the morning. By daylight, the longhouse looked normal in the way a battlefield looks tidy after fresh snow. The cup still wore its frost mustache. The juniper over the door smelled like a forest trying very hard to be brave. People spoke in brave voices and chose brave chores. If anyone said ghost, it came out as go a goat. We set watches for that night door, windows, hearth, and, importantly, Harold's mouth. I drew the late shift with him anyway. The logic was simple. The gods must love a fool. They keep him alive to entertain them. Rules recap. I told him as the sun slid off the world. No names. No singing. No knocking. Especially not 3 times. I'm not an idiot, he said, which is the most reliable way to foreshadow something unfortunate. The first half of the night was the ordinary kind of cold that just wants your nose. The stars were hammered into the sky like nails. The dog roamed, sniffed the corners, then came back to lean against my leg with the enthusiasm of a second blanket. That's when we heard it low 2 notes, like a bow drawn across a thick nerve. Not outside, inside the ribs. Harold made the face of a man recognizing a tune. Easy chorus, he whispered. I elbowed him hard enough to move his thoughts. We don't hum to the unknown. He nodded, then nodded again, as if agreeing with himself twice could count for magic. The dog's ears tilted toward the door. She didn't growl. She simply began to act like a creature who has had enough of indoor mysteries. We followed her outside into snow that squeaked like honest boots. The village lay in that midnight blue that makes every roof look like a sleeping animal. Down by the fence, something had thawed and refroze into a narrow black seam. It led away from the house like a ribbon you really shouldn't pull. We traded a look that said, "We're going to pull it anyway." The ribbon took us past the sheds, past the midden that smells like everything we don't put in stories, and out toward the burial hill. There the ground was furred with hoarfrost, all glitter and glitter's quiet cousin. On the oldest stone we saw a halo of damp, the way a cup leaves its ring on a table. Rocks don't sweat in February. Not around here. Could be a fox, Harold offered. A very respectful one. Or your cousin, I said. He didn't laugh, which I respected. We stood a long minute not saying a name. The 2-note hum came again, closer now, almost kind. You could believe it was a welcome if you'd had enough mead and a bad year. It was the kind of melody that invites you to fill in the 3rd note yourself, like it's doing you a favor. Don't, I said to absolutely everyone, including myself. Harold, who communicates mostly in verbs, scooped up 2 stones and knocked them together in his palm. Tuck. He did it again. Tuck. I swear the gods leaned forward. Then, because human habits are a ladder with exactly 3 rungs, he did it a 3rd time. Somewhere a monk dipped a quill and wrote idiot. The wind stopped like a held breath. Far out over the flats, the fog began to lift itself into shapes, the way smoke figures itself out into people when you stare too long. 2 shadows stood where the mist thickened. They weren't close enough to frighten us sensibly, and not far enough to let courage explain itself. Their edges were wrong, like carved wood trying to remember how to bend. If they come at us, I said, let's pretend to be furniture. Good plan, he said, and for one heartbeat, I believed we might nail it. From behind us came a wet snort and an unmistakable chomp. We spun like doors on a bat hinge. Out of the dark stepped the goat, smug, chewing our juniper charm like a salad. She stared at us with the moral authority of a creature who has never once broken a rule it understood. By the time we turned back, the shapes in the fog were gone, or they had decided we weren't worth the price of admission. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or if relief had been quietly replaced by the feeling you get when a wave withdraws before it hits something big. We should go, I said. We should run, Harold said. We will walk quickly with dignity. I corrected, which is Run's older brother. Back at the lawn house, the door bar felt colder than iron has any right to be. Inside, the fire had slouched but not died. I added a small log as if feeding an opinion. People slept in that heroic way only the overly tired manage. The dog padded to the back corner where the old net hung and stared into it like it might blink. There were wet prints across the floorboards, small puddled ovals that were not footprints so much as footprints memory. They led from the door to that same corner and then simply stopped. I have never liked when evidence behaves like a polite guest. On the wall above the prints, a thin rim of frost had formed, exactly the size of the metal band on the museum-worthy cup. It looked like someone had held the cup there for a thoughtful moment and then set it down somewhere we couldn't agree on. In the sleeping loft, a child laughed softly in his dream. 2 notes, perfect. I pressed a finger to my lips so hard I nearly shushed my own face. The melody drifted back from the corner, faint, patient, the musical equivalent of an open hand. From the ceiling came a single pop as a beam adjusted to being a beam. The dog lay down, but she did not take her eyes off the net. I could feel the house thinking, which is not a sentence I ever wanted to write. At the door, the latch lifted without hands. It didn't fly up. It rose with the dignity of something that has never needed to hurry. Harold and I froze into excellent statues. The bar gave a tiny sigh as weight leaned against it from the other side, the sound of wood remembering pressure. Second invitation, I whispered, and I wasn't sure if I meant theirs or ours. A sliver of night slid through the crack where the planks don't quite meet. In that sliver something glittered, a ring of hoarfrost threading the air like a halo being practiced. The melody paused, as if waiting for us to be smart. We didn't knock. We didn't sing. We didn't say a name. But from the sleeping loft a small hand reached over the edge, groped in the dark, and found the little toy boat the boy had carved with his father. The hand let it go. The boat fell, nose first, pointed perfectly at the door. The latch lifted 1 grain higher. And then the fire, which had been doing so well, exhaled as if someone had leaned close and told it a secret. That was the exact second I realized memory is also a door. And in our house tonight, both were standing a little too open. Morning wore the same face as the last one, blue light, hard air, a house pretending nothing unusual had happened to it. We pretended right back. That's a village's best skill, collective pretending with chores. We held a meeting, which is what you call it when people stand around a fire and try not to admit they're scared. The agenda had 2 items. Don't invite the wrong audience. Keep living anyway. Sterile the smith hammered a nail flat just to feel like the world still obeyed iron. The women braided red thread and tied it to cup handles, nothing mystical, just something to do with hands that would rather hold children. The old men repeated advice everyone already knew, which is a traditional male comfort food. Salt at the threshold, said the elder. Juniper over the door. Hot coal kept alive, even a thumb of it. Iron under the sill. And what about Harold's mouth? Someone asked. We'll post a guard, I said. 2, to be sure. We also banned 3 things by unanimous laughter. Knocking, whistling after dark, and the phrase "come on in" said to nobody. Trade was due in 3 days. Winter market, small but necessary. You can't eat bravado or mend a roof with courage. We needed wool, a new hand millstone, 2 good knives, and news. News is a currency too, though it spends fast. So we made ready.
That looks like chopping wood until the axe feels like a handshake, boiling pitch to seal leaky seams, and arguing about whether the sled runners need fresh fat or fresh faith. We set aside decent pelts and the kind of carved spoons buyers pretend not to want until they pick them up, just to look.
I took inventory of the quiet talismans, a little iron fish to hang above the door, rowan twigs bent, not broken, slipped into rafters, and the small rune-stone that had lived on the hearth shelf long enough to be considered furniture. On a whim, I turned the stone over. Somebody, somewhere back in the family, had scratched 2 short lines into the underside. 2 notes visualized. Nothing else. The dog watched all this with the professional concern of someone who has no thumbs but lots of opinions. She avoided the corner where the old net hung. When she had to pass it, she became a narrow, careful version of herself, like a boat in fog. Around midday, a stranger arrived from the South Track, wrapped in sealskin and the kind of silence traders carry to hide what they know. He offered greetings, the kind polite men use when choosing who they might sell to first. Then he looked over my shoulder into the longhouse, as if listening through wood. "You're keeping embers," he said. "Yes." "Good. Keep them rude." He meant bright and disobedient. He bought a small pelt with clean silver, which means he wanted to be liked, then leaned in on the price of a spoon until we all respected his profession. As he turned to go, he said, too casually, "Don't answer twice." "Twice what?" I asked. "Anything," he said, and left before we could decide if he was odd or just from somewhere that speaks like that. We built more rules. If there's one thing fear produces in abundance, it's policy. The children were told not to sing anything they didn't learn from someone with warm hands. The men were told to say, "Who's there?"
using the wrong number of syllables, which is harder than it sounds. The women, who have always known about doors of all kinds, posted a bowl of ash water by the entry and a small broom. If something invisible tracked wet onto our floor again, we would see it and sweep it back out like a bad idea.
By late afternoon, the village had that look all good ships get before weather, tied down, tucked in, and privately wondering why the horizon won't mind its business. We ate early and solid, cheese that fights the knife, bread that forgives no one, meat that tells you what animal it used to be. Someone told a joke with an ending so obvious, we all enjoyed it twice. Dusk arrived like the part of a song where the drum drops out.
We lit tallow and let the fire do the real work. The old Rune-Stone on the shelf felt heavier in the room than it ever had in the hand. Harold sat on his hands, which proved the guard system worked. The first odd thing was small: steam unwound from a cup that wasn't near heat.
The second was smaller still. The dog's ears pivoted toward the rafters, and then, in a gesture I'd never seen from her, she sneezed once, as if shaking a word out of her nose. The third thing was not small. That low, 2-note hum came back, but this time it didn't present itself as music. It arrived as memory, the feeling you get when you reach for a step that isn't there and your body invents a step to keep you from falling. Everyone in the room stiffened at the same heartbeat, like the house had just read our minds and come to the same paragraph. "Do not answer," the elder said, soft but shaped like law. From the sleeping loft, a child answered, laughing, yes, but on the right pitch. The melody ended before anyone could be angry at a dream. We sat it out. 2 notes came twice, then didn't come the third time. Relief tried to happen. It almost made it. Because then came footsteps. Not outside, not overhead, between. Imagine if sound decided to be a shadow. Something walked along the wall, heel to toe, like a polite visitor who didn't want to wake the house. Frost limned the path a handspan above the baseboards, a pale ghost river that made the wood look like it had decided to breathe winter. The path went to the door, stopped at the ash bowl, and paused, no ripple, no dip, just a courtesy of attention that made every neck hair vote for exile. Then it crossed to the hearth, lingered where the coals lay. The embers brightened as if being praised. It rose the width of a cup rim, drew a circle in glitter, and drifted toward the shelf. I did not look at the old stone. I looked at the people, because there is nothing scarier than watching fear choose a face. The elder's face chose stubborn. The women's faces chose practical. Harold's face briefly flirted with an idea it left before becoming a decision. The frost ring reached the shelf and hesitated, precisely where a cup would hang in a careful hand. The two-note hum sighed once more, not louder, just more present, like a name in a letter. I reached for the poker and moved the coals, not to feed them exactly, but to remind them we loved them. The fire answered with a taller tongue, sending warm air up the chimney as if lifting a chin. The ring thinned. Tell it we're busy, Harold whispered, because humor is our smallest door and also our safest. We are, I said, to the room, to the dog, to whatever treaties fire can carry. Markets in 3 days. Roofs. Boots. Soup. Sleep. The frost ring eased back a thumb's width. It felt like a negotiation. From outside, faint as fog's opinion, came another two-note answer. Not ours. Not from our hill either. It came from down valley, near where the track turns and the river slows. Then another, farther still. The sound moved like lanterns do when people pass news from hamlet to hamlet. We looked at each other with the particular horror reserved for realizing you are part of a wider conversation. Not just us, someone said. Then not just our rules, someone else said. The elders stood, old bones organizing themselves like soldiers. We will meet them on our terms, he said, and suddenly it was obvious there would be a third feast whether we wanted one or not market eve, to keep the village gathered and the embers arrogant. We set to planning. Who would sit where? Which cups would be out and which would be face down? Where the iron would live? The women marked the floor with chalk at the points we thought the frost liked best, like setting traps for a story. I trimmed the juniper over the door and tucked a twig behind the Rune-Stone because sometimes old friends need something to scent the air with. When we were done pretending preparation into existence, the house felt less alone. Even the dog yawned like a sermon had ended. Stay awake in pairs, the elder said. Speak plainly. Don't answer twice. The room loosened. People bedded down in clumps, as tribes do. I took first watch at the door with Harold, who had successfully kept his mouth from inventing invitations for an entire hour and was exhausted by the heroism. You think they'll come? He asked. They already have, I said. Now we see if we can be boring enough to keep them polite. He grinned. Your specialty. Thank you, I said. It's the nicest thing anyone has called me. Outside, night pressed its forehead to the window, curious. Inside, the coals ticked like old clocks. The dog finally closed her eyes, but not the way dogs do when they trust sleep. More like how scouts rest, one ear deep in the world, one ear taking notes. Halfway through the watch, when the room felt almost ordinary again, the ash bowl by the door made the tiniest sound, a papery kiss, like a fingertip testing cold water. We both looked down. A single, perfect print had appeared in the gray surface. Not a foot, not a hand, a cup rim. It lifted away in no time, leaving a clean circle in the ash as if to say, place is set. From the loft, as reliable as superstition, the child rolled over and softly sang 2 notes in his sleep. We did not answer. We stared at that circle until it became everything, a welcome, a warning, a deadline. And somewhere down valley, quiet as a man keeping a promise, a third note finally surfaced long, low, and moving toward us. Market Eve is supposed to be easy, a short feast, a long checklist, and everybody in bed early pretending not to worry about prices. We laid the room out like we were hosting relatives we didn't like but needed iron under the sill, juniper over the door, chalk X's where the frost liked to walk, and 3 cups placed face down, because superstition is just policy with better PR. Seats. The elder asked. We set one extra by accident, I said, and nobody laughed. We ate heavy on purpose, bread that makes your jaw earn its keep, meat that admits what animal it used to be, cheese with the self-esteem of a boulder. The fire threw steady light. The coals were rude and bright the way the trader advised. For 15 whole minutes the house remembered being only a house. Then the steam happened. Not from the stew. From a cup across the table that nobody had touched. It unwound in a thin ribbon, innocent as you please, like a breath practicing its manners. Roll check, I said. No names, no knocking, no answering twice. Harold put both hands under his thighs like he was sitting on a pair of badly behaved birds. The dog stared at the door so hard the planks ought to have apologized. The 2-note hum arrived without asking permission. It didn't fill the room. It made the room taller. You know that feeling when you step onto old floorboards and the house decides to hold you? That, but with sound. Do not answer, the elder said, voice pitched for law, not comfort. From the loft, the child laughed in his sleep and hit the first note exactly. Every adult in the room forgot how to swallow for an unflattering second. The melody didn't push, it waited. Waiting can be a kind of push. Across the table, Torvald, the man who breaks oars and claims the oar started it, tapped a fingertip on his cup once, twice. His eyes widened at himself. He opened his mouth to apologize, which would have been the 3rd time. I slid my hand across the table and put 2 fingers on the cup's lip like I was teaching it to breathe. He shut his mouth so hard his beard clicked. The dog's hackles rose, not up her spine, but out, like fur trying to remember wind. Frost stitched itself along the chalk marks we'd drawn on the floor, neat as a scribe, and stopped exactly where we'd asked it to in the only language we had, lines. Embers, I whispered to the fire, and moved them with the poker, not to feed them, but to remind them they had fans. The song changed its mind about being polite. It came in lower, patient and heavy, like water deciding what shape to take. The flame bowed once. Then it went out. Not a gasp, not a sputter, just decided. The longhouse did the kind of dark that makes you hear the shape of your own head. Someone choked on a pray word. Someone else found the child's hand in the dark without needing to see. Harold whispered, I can fix this, which is the most dangerous sentence we own, and struck steel on flint. Skit, skit, skit. Sparks jumped like brave fleas and died without touching anything. The coal we'd kept for luck sat there like a memory that didn't belong to us anymore. A circle bloomed in pale glitter on the table 3 seats down, exact cup rim, undeniable, like the ash bowl's mark had stood up and asked for a chair. The cup we'd left face down next to it twitched, lifted a finger's width without fingers, and settled upright. Steam unfurled. If manners had physics, it looked like that. Don't engage, the elder said, and I believed him until he stopped blinking. Torvald had gone quiet in a way that isn't peace. His breath fogged once and then didn't. Ice whiskers laced his beard like a joke winter tells when it's being mean. I was up and around the benches before my chair decided to fall, put 2 fingers to his neck, and got a slow answer I did not like. Move him, I said. Where? Harold asked. Anywhere that isn't there, I said, and we hauled Torvald back from the circle the way you pull a net away from a clever fish. His skin under my hands felt like Dor would in January. I rubbed his sternum and told him 3 rude stories in a row. On the 3rd, his lungs remembered they had a job. He coughed once, a single shard of winter, and blinked at me like I'd woken him from a boring sermon. The song kept singing. It didn't get louder. It got closer. At the door, the latch lifted with a courtesy we couldn't stand. The bar leaned forward like a man reconsidering his principles. Juniper sighed. The ash water by the threshold quivered and made that soft kiss sound, cup rims saying present. Say the thing, Harold hissed. The market thing. We're busy, I told the room, the fire, the old stone on the shelf, and anything else that traffics in treaties. Boots, roofs, soup, sleep. Not tonight. You can be proud of a village and still understand when a village is about to be tested on something it didn't study. The women moved iron to each corner, red threads cut and retied, ashes stirred to show tracks. The old men did the only useful thing old men can do in a hurry. They sat where they were told and didn't argue. The latch climbed another grain. Second invitation, I said. A new sound joined the hum then, the faintest third note from outside, farther down valley again, like an echo arriving before the shout. It made the hair on my arms consider a union. Whatever this was, it wasn't just ours anymore. The song had neighbors. The frost line on the floor stepped over our chalk with the bored confidence of a cat. It came to the hearth, traced a perfect circle the size of a cup in midair, and drifted toward the shelf where the old Rune-Stone lives. The stone, which has never noticed anyone except dust, felt suddenly like a name tag. No, the elder said, not to the stone, but to the idea of the stone. His voice found timber in the dark. You have no seat here. The dog stood. Not the kind of stand you do to scare a fox, the kind you do when you plan to be furniture in front of a door. She positioned herself on the threshold like a question with teeth. The circle paused a hand's width from the stone. Tell it a rule, Harold whispered. We already did, I said. It's telling us one. From the loft a quiet voice, the child again, because fate enjoys a through line, hummed one note, the lower one, then stopped. Everyone in the room held perfectly still, and for a greedy second I thought we might survive on stillness alone. The circle pulled back from the shelf, turned, like thought changes direction, and settled above the chair we left by accident. Steam rolled from empty air into the shape of a cup you could pick up if you didn't care how you slept later. The chair creaked like wood does when it remembers a weight. And then, finally, we saw them. Not silhouettes. Not fog people. Not anything a sober man can call weather. Two places in the room had edges that behaved like bodies. One tall, one stout. They did not glow. They did not moan. They did something worse and better. They sat. The bench sighed as though relieved to be included. No one ran. Running is a choice, and we had made too many choices already. The tall one lifted its cup, the one nobody had put there, and a slow ribbon of steam reached for the ceiling like a blessing. The stout one's head inclined a fraction toward the child's loft. The two-note hum swelled the width of a breath. Our fire, which had been sulking in the dark like a demoted god, found a coal and flared. Light slid across the room like a knife you didn't mean to draw. For a heartbeat we saw more than we wanted, hollows where cheeks should be, a scar of frost where a lip should remember warmth, and on the stout one's wrist 5 thin lines of dirt, the way roots mark skin when someone has been pulled from a hill. The elder stood. You are not uninvited, he said carefully. You are also not guests. The tall one tilted its head in a motion that, in any other tavern, would mean fair. The stout one laid something on the table we couldn't see. The old Rune-Stone on the shelf pinged, just once, a tiny bright sound, like flint agreeing with steel across a room. Torvald groaned. alive enough now to be inconvenient, and the song shifted to acknowledge him the way rivers acknowledge stones. It leaned. The fire went short again. The dark gathered itself, and for the first time that winter, the door bar dropped of its own accord, wood on wood, a blunt, undeniable note. That was the moment denial left the village like smoke. We were not telling a story anymore. We were in one. And the worst of it? The room felt relieved, as if some part of the longhouse had been waiting for the song to stop pretending and simply arrive. "Don't answer," I said, which at that point was a prayer, not a rule. Somewhere down valley, the third note kept coming. Morning came on like it had an alibi. The longhouse smelled of smoke and men who'd almost been sensible. The bench where the two had sat was dry as a sermon, but the table held something new, a small comb carved from whalebone, teeth fine as frost, root dirt still sleeping in the grooves. Somebody had cleaned their hair with this last. The stout one set it down, I said. Like a bill, Harold said. Like a memory, the elder answered, which is a bill by another name. We called a meeting, which in our village means everyone stands around pretending to warm their hands while warming opinions. I hammered the minutes into the air so we'd remember later what we swore now. Item 1. We agree the visitors are not weather. Thus 24-0. Item 2. No names, no knocking, no singing, no answering twice. Reaffirmed with shouting. Item 3. Decide if they're ancestors or trouble. Tabled until someone grows wisdom. Item 4. Whose comb? Open floor. Could be Frady's grandmother, someone said. She had a comb like that, buried with her on the hill. Or Torvald's first wife, someone else offered. Torvald blushed in a color that looks expensive. Or it's a message, I said. Return what was borrowed. Or borrow what was returned. Einar the Old cleared his throat, which in a room like ours is the same as a drum. In the sagas, they leave tokens when they want a seat, not forever. A place, a cup, a name spoken correctly. One night out of the year where the door counts as a bridge. Market Eve was last night, Harold said. Then perhaps market brings them, Einar said, eyes on the comb. Or perhaps the market needs witnesses. We split the room by accident and on purpose. Half said ancestors, treat them like grandparents who forgot they're gone. Half said Draugr, treat them like flooded basements with opinions. A smaller, quieter half looked at the loft where the child slept and asked with their eyes whether a song can choose a throat. Stop staring at my boy, the mother said. He hums everything. He hums soup. Let's assume the living stay blameless until proven otherwise, the elder said, and every married man nodded like he had invented the rule. The trader's odd advice, don't answer twice, nagged us like a pebble in the boot. 2 notes, 2 knocks, 2 nights, a third note rolling down valley like a slow drum. The math was trying to happen. All right, the elder said. 2 teams. 1 to the hill, daylight only. 1 to the valley path, see what the neighbors are singing about. No heroics and no cleverness. Just eyes. I volunteer for no cleverness, Harold said. It's my natural state. Take him anyway, the elder told me. Cleverness needs a chaperone. We set out before the sun could argue. The goat followed until she remembered she had a quarrel with the Juniper over the door and returned to settle it. The dog came all the way, professional as a priest. The burial hill had slept in pearls of hoarfrost that made our boots sound like lies. Fridas found her grandmother's stone by nose. Grief's stores sent longer than we admit. On the mound closest to it, a shallow scuff, like fingers had combed the earth thoughtfully. The comb in my pocket felt heavier, as if the hole wanted it back. We won't open anything, I said. We'll return something, Fridas said, and took the comb into both hands like a prayer you can hold. We didn't build a shrine. We don't do architecture for ghosts. We tied the comb with red thread to a low branch of the rowan that leans over that part of the hill. It swung a little and then stopped exactly where wind would have kept it moving. My skin filed a complaint with my brain. My brain passed it on to the gods. The gods stamped it seen. Say nothing twice, I reminded, and we stood quiet long enough to qualify as faithful. On the way down we found rings in places rings don't happen perfect, pale circles on stones, as if cups had been resting on the valley's spine. One by the sled track bend. Another near the old willow where boys pretend to smoke reeds and talk like kings. A third at the fork toward the south hamlets. The song's been traveling, I said. Setting places, Harold said. Market seats. Or a road.
Back in the village, the Valley team had brought news heavy as wet wool. The next hamlet overheard the two-note hum across their field at dusk, and then a third note far downstream around midnight. A string of sound. They set a cup on our ash bowl. 2, the messenger said, lifting his sleeve to show goose flesh that had become permanent.
We didn't answer. We said busy things. He looked at our dog the way men look at solutions they can pet. The dog accepted the compliment and continued guarding the concept of thresholds. So, not just us, the elder said. He had the expression of a man building a bridge while walking it. Then not just our rules, I said, and he grimaced because I was right, and he dislikes when I do that in public. We argued the shape of brave. Some wanted to shut the longhouse and salt it shut and pretend we live under rocks. Some wanted to set a place on purpose and see who takes it, because curiosity is a sin we keep separate from the others to use later. Einar suggested a third path, Parley. Not of feast, he said. A reckoning. We hold the market here, under our roof, and we keep the rules the way a boat keeps its ribs, tight. If they come,
And it seems they've sent RSVPs. We tell them, 1 night, 1 seat, 1 cup, no names, no songs, no bargains we can't carry.
we give them food that remembers the sun. We keep iron in the corners and a coal alive on purpose. And we do not answer twice. Why feed them? Torvald said, now alive enough to be contrary. Because feeding is our language, Einar said. If we're going to say no, we say it in a sentence we speak well. Everyone looked at me. My specialty is saying boring things loudly until they become law. All right, I said. Parley. Market goes on here. We set a chair because pretending we didn't is how we got here. We face the cups down and only we turn them. We keep the child upstairs with 2 grandmothers and a story that lasts longer than fear. And if anyone feels a song in their mouth, swallow it and call it soup. Agenda approved, the elder said. You could feel the house listen. Houses like plans, it gives the beams something to hold the side snow. We prepared like we were expecting both kinds of guests. The women laid out bread that says, we're civilized, and salted fish that says, we're not easy. The men stacked firewood like a fort and then pretended it was decoration. Red thread on cup handles. Iron nails tucked under each threshold like teeth. The comb on the rowan Fridas checked it twice, hung undecided, and then decided to be still. Down valley, just before dusk, the third note came again. Not louder. Nearer. The sort of near that writes its name on your breath. It was answered by 2 notes from the hamlet beyond ours, then another pair farther still, like a chain of lanterns passing evening along. Inside our longhouse, the ash bowl by the door kissed again. A perfect circle etched itself in the gray. The slate next to it fogged with a ring the exact size of the museum cup's band. On the shelf, the old Rune-Stone pinged once more, and when I turned it over without thinking, There were 3 scratched lines on the underside, not 2. Fresh, clean, unapologetic. I didn't do that, I said to the room, which is the sort of sentence you only get to say once and still be believed. The elder laid his palm over the stone like a man calming a horse. Mark it under one roof, he said to it, or to whatever had sent it mail. One night, one seat, one cup, no names, no songs, no twice. From the loft the child started to giggle, sleep doing its usual terrible job of guarding secrets, and hummed the first note before his grandmother pinched it out of the air with a look. The dog lifted her head toward the door and made no sound at all, which is the loudest she ever gets. We opened the doors to the market, which looked like what happens when practical people cosplay hope. Neighbors shuffled in with their wool and knives in faces that had practiced calm all the way here. We kept the chairs odd on purpose. We kept the cups honest. We spoke prices, which is a spell all its own. The hum arrived in the middle of someone trying to sell a spoon too fancy for its own good. 2 notes, then silence waiting for manners. The ember on the hearth sat up straighter. Frost feathered our chalk axes, then paused like a guest reading a sign. Welcome, roll supply. No one said a name. No one knocked. No one answered twice. And then the bar on the door lifted by itself again, civil, deliberate, like a host who hates lateness. The plank eased inward. Night folded in at the edges of the room like it owned the blue in the wood. The extra chair creaked, relieved to be correct. Stay boring, I told my people, because for once boring might keep us alive. The tall place and the stout place took shape by taking room. Steam curled from nowhere and chose cups. The old stone pinged a 3rd time, like a flint finishing a thought. The comb on the hill did not move. The child upstairs didn't sing. For a breath it felt like we'd threaded a needle with our eyes closed. For the love of prices, Harold whispered, maybe we can actually do this. Which is exactly when the messenger from Down Valley shouldered through the back door with his hood half off and a face borrowed from bad news. They didn't stop at us, he said. They kept coming. And the 3rd note? It isn't a note. What is it? I asked. A name, he said. And whoever answers it doesn't answer again. The word name put a crack through the room the way frost puts a crack through a bucket. It didn't get louder after that, it got truer. People found places to put their eyes that weren't each other's faces. Spell it, I told the messenger. What did you hear? He shook his head like he was trying to pour water out of his ears. Not letters. Not like speech. Like he searched. Like the 3rd note took a direction and turned into someone you know. And if that someone said anything back, they were done. Standing. Breathing. Just done. Done could mean 100 things. None of them spent well. All right, the elder said, collecting our panic like firewood. We'll behave like we have sense. We'll keep the market under one roof. We'll keep the rules, and we'll make new ones. No one answers to anything. Not to names. Not to jokes. Not to, hey you. We answer to prices and numbers. If you must speak, speak arithmetic. Finally, Harold said, a language I can't ruin. We set the lawn house like a problem we meant to pass. Cups face down except the ones we guard. Iron under the thresholds. Red thread on handles. Chalk lines where the frost likes to walk. A wedge of iron pressed against the door bar like a stubborn thought. The dog lay across the threshold the way a bridge keeps a river honest. New names, I said, because if fear teaches anything, it's rebranding. The elder is market. Einar is ledger. Friedis is Rowan. Torvald is no price. Harold is do not. What about you? Harold asked. Boring, I said. I plan to live up to it. The neighbors poured in with wool and knives and 100 faces that had practiced calm on the walk. We packed the house full of trade until it had the right smell: leather, tallow, old bread, and hope stapled to fear with laughter. Then the third note came. Not loud, not far. It came from the edge of the room like a hand testing a lock. 2 notes first, the doorbell we already hated, then the third, and every head turned as if someone had just said your name behind your back in your mother's voice. The elder didn't blink. "Prices," he barked. "Say them." Like soldiers who had practiced the wrong war, we shouted numbers. 3 knives a pelt, 2 loaves for a fish, for nails for a cup ring. It was stupid and exactly right. The name slid past us like a blade that couldn't find a seam. The door bar lifted a hair and sulked. The ash bowl by the threshold kissed itself, SHAPT, and a clean rim printed in the gray. Frost stitched along our chalk lines like a scribe taking notes. The third note bent in the air, trying again, and aimed at a man near the stew pots. His wife clamped a hand on his sleeve with the casual speed of someone preventing a house fire. He didn't answer. He just looked very hard at his bowl like it owed him money. "Keep it busy," I said to the fire with the poker. The ember sat up straighter, remembered arrogance, and licked the log like it had critics. A shape took a seat at the extra chair, no drama, no glow, just room deciding to sit down. Steam coiled out of the empty air and chose a cup. Another shape shouldered in beside it, stout and deliberate, and the bench complained like old would happy to be meted. "We are not unwelcoming," the elder said, voice pitched for treaties. "We are also not called." The tall thing tilted in the way tavern men used to negotiate. The stout one angled its not face toward the loft. Every back in the room sprouted a second spine. The third note rolled again from the door seam, turned, and found the elder. I felt it hit him, saw his shoulders change the way a door changes when the right key finds it. It didn't say his name. It was his name, folded into a sound he had been born remembering. We all spoke at once, prices, loud and dumb like shields. 6 for the shoes, 8 for the flour, a dozen for the nails. Numbers piled up in the rafters like smoke. The elder didn't answer. His eyes watered the way eyes do when wind makes a point. He blinked it away. The note slid off him, offended by arithmetic. Next, I muttered, because problems keep a queue. The next was Torvald. Of course it was. He's the kind of man names always find. The note swung like a lantern and landed in his beard. His lips opened on reflex, and I slapped a wooden tag into his hand, and no price. He read it out loud. The room laughed the brave laugh. The note hated us for it, good. The Rune-Stone on the shelf pinged once, then twice, then a third time that sounded like flint finishing a thought. I turned it over. There were 3 fine scratches now, the new ones still damp cold under my thumb. Need, I thought, gnaw. Or maybe no. Either works. From the loft, the child giggled in his sleep, a clean, happy sound that would have been medicine any other night. He hummed one note without meaning to, the lower one. Story, the grandmother hissed to the other women. Now, they began, all at once, a mighty boring story about bread, how it rises, how it fails, how the old oven likes to be talked to, and the child relaxed into the safest yawn I've ever seen. The third note grew curious and mean. It tried the dog. She heard it and did the rarest thing dogs do, nothing. She didn't even blink. She simply stayed dog, which is a kind of holiness. The note had no purchase on holiness. Outside, the chain answered 2 notes from the hamlet beyond ours, then another pair farther down. The market went quiet the way markets do just before someone admits the real price. We understood, with the clarity you only get once a decade, that we were part of a line, and lines have ends. Hold, the elder said, and his voice finally put walls back on the room. The stout shape set something on the table. I didn't see a hand. I saw placement. When the fire lifted its chin again, we saw a small iron nail, old and clean the way river stones are clean. It rang once, bright, against the wood. A gift? A reminder? An invoice? Return what was borrowed, Einar murmured, almost pleased. Or borrow what was returned. Fridas touched the nail with the kind of respect you save for tools. Rowan's comb is on the hill, she said to the air, to the knot faces, to the name that wanted a throat. It is staying there. The third note changed direction and came at the loft like a polite ladder. The dog moved before thought, planted herself at the bottom rung, and showed all the kindness of teeth that prefer peace. The frost line stopped at her paws and became very interested in being a circle on the floor instead. I loved that dog the way you love a door that refuses the wrong story. More numbers, I said, because if you don't know the right magic, you use math. We priced everything in the room twice, because once might be an answer. The bar on the door lifted another whisper. The iron wedge held like a friend at your worst confession. The ash bowl kissed again SHAPT and left a second ring inside the first, a double place setting. The elder's mouth pressed into a line men make when they remember they were once sons. It's offering two, Harold breathed. 2 seats. 2 cups. 2, don't, I said. Don't was his new name. He wore it well. Outside the valley sent up its own third note. Closer now, a slow tide of attention coming toward us. Someone in the back whispered an actual name, habit, fear, love. It doesn't matter, and we all flinched like he'd thrown a spear. I slapped a price into the space his word had made. 10 for the spindle. The room followed, clumsy choir, beautiful for being alive. The tall shape turned its knot face toward me. I felt the temperature of my history change. You know the way a memory stands up in you, ready to take attendance? That? The third note folded in. It tried a smaller key. It tried my name. It didn't sound like my mother. It sounded like the day she stopped calling me in for supper, and I had to learn to come in on my own. It sounded like every time I'd heard my name in judgment and in joy and in stupid jokes by men who needed sound to keep their hands from shaking. It was my name boiled down to a use. My mouth, traitor, friend thought it might be nice to remember how answering works. Prices, the elder said, not to me, but at me, the way men throw ropes to men who haven't admitted they're in water. 15 for the lightest boots, 20 if you want to keep your toes, I said, and my voice came back like a dog that had been out too long and realized dinner was better than pride. The note tilted its head. It tried again, softer, closer, into the part of the ear that listens to stories. I looked at the floor until the numbers steadied. 1 hearth, 2 guests, 3 scratches on the stone. For nails under thresholds. 5 breaths to a laugh if you make yourself. I made myself. The note left me like weather changing its mind about a field. From the back door, a fist hit would 3 times, hard enough to make sawdust remember it used to be a tree. The messenger from down valley again, white as a new page. They've stopped answering past Osterby, he said, voice clipped to fit inside his breath. The third note called, and people stared like they'd just remembered the right word and then forgot everything else. Bodies, the elder asked. Standing, the messenger said. Breathing. Quiet. The way quiet should be illegal. We didn't look at the child. We didn't look at the comb's absence by the hearth. We didn't look at the 2 shapes enjoying our furniture. All right, the elder said, and every joint in his hands made the sound old wood makes when it refuses to break. We hold to parley. We feed what has a mouth. We refuse what needs an answer. We keep one ember alive, for us and for whatever counts us still. The tall shape lifted its cup. Steam rose, innocent as forgiveness. The stout one turned something invisible on the table once, twice, and stopped just short of the third. A courtesy or instruction? Tell it a rule, Harold whispered, brave in the way drunks are without the drink. We have rules, I said. We'll see if they wanted us to remember ours or theirs. The Rune-Stone pinged a fourth time that wasn't a ping so much as a knock-only stone understands. Fradies's mouth opened around a name that never learned how to be a number. She closed it with grief's plain strength. A cold crept up the ladder to the loft and paused at the rung where the grandmothers had hung a finished sock, small, striped, the kind of practical miracle women make when no one is writing songs. Frost laced the toe, then reconsidered and withdrew. The sock survived. Sometimes that's all a victory is allowed to be. The third note turned in the room like a fox looking for the right hen. Having failed at me, it gathered itself higher, wider, and for the first time addressed the house. I felt the beam above us answer with a dry pop, the way old timber answers when named. The door bar twitched against its iron wedge as if remembering being a tree with wind in it. Stay, I told the wood, and laid my palm there as if the house had a forehead. It did. All houses do. It calmed. The shapes, tall and stout, sat the way men sit when they have something to finish and all winter to finish it. The ash bowl wore 2 clean rings. The old stone kept its 3 lines and whatever it had decided about them. The market murmured prices like a prayer designed by accountants. Outside, the valley's third note kept coming. And then, because stories enjoy taking turns with mercy, the name came back to me. Not loud, not even demanding. It arrived like a warm hand over my shoulder, heavy with recognition, gentle with certainty. The room fell away into it. I stared into the steam of a cup that wasn't there and saw the shape of a boy shipped forward in time by chores and jokes to a man who had no business answering anything. I did not say my name. I said the only number that mattered. 1, I told the ember, the dog, the door, the guest, the beam, the boy upstairs, the mountain outside, and every neighbor's breath strung to ours. 1 house. The ember rose. The iron wedge held. The dog thumped her tail once a vote. The third note considered the math. And then the longhouse took a breath I had never heard it take before, with us, which is to say, I stopped believing we were only the people inside it. The name smiled in my ear and went to find a worse listener. That's when the messenger, pale, polite disaster, remembered his last piece of news. They're not just calling people, he said, voice down to a treaty. Down valley they called the village. And the village, he swallowed, answered. The bar shuddered against iron. The chalk lines silvered and held. Steam lifted like a question. Our guests, patient as bedrock, waited to see if we were a place or a crowd. We decided not to answer. For now, we did the brave thing villages do when they don't know what to do. We made a plan so detailed even fear would need a checklist. We called it the reckoning because let's wing it had stopped sounding like leadership. First decision, no more 1 house. The messenger's news had landed, down valley. The third note had called the village, and the village singular had answered like a big animal remembering its birth name. That was on us. I'd said 1 house last night like a man painting a target and calling it a charm. New rule, the elder said. Many under 1 roof. Not one called thing. Finally, I said, a policy I can obey by being disorganized. We rearranged the room to look like plural on purpose. Odd numbers of everything. Staggered benches. Cups turned at different angles like geese with their own opinions. The women braided mismatched red threads on handles. The men tucked iron nails under different thresholds. If a god looked down, it would have to admit, this was not a choir, this was a market. Einar, the old, stood with the Rune-Stone in his palm like a man holding a word he doesn't want to waste. In the sagas, he said, tokens mean seats, not ownership. A comb says memory, a nail says fix. If they left a nail, we fix something. Fix what? Harold asked, which is his spiritual gift. The door's idea, Einar said, almost pleased. We nail the name to the outside, not the inside. It's a good village that lets an old man get away with a sentence like that. We set the iron wedge firm, and the elder, in an act of faith disguised as carpentry, hammered the nail into the door frame, not through wood we couldn't replace, but through the lintel charm, a clean knock of iron that made every shoulder in the room try not to flinch. Tack, tack, tiake. Apologies, the elder told the house, laying a palm there. Stay many. The air loosened a thumb's width. The two shapes at the spare seats, the tall and the stout, tilted minutely, like men conceding a point in a long argument. Steam softened. The ash bowl didn't kiss. For a moment, we believed we had repaired something only stories are supposed to repair. Now for the talking, I said, because my job is saying boring out loud until it's law. We hold market. We speak prices, measures, weights. We recite the length of ropes, the widths of sled runners, which fish sulk in which months. If we must sing, we sing recipes. The door tried a polite thought against the bar and reconsidered. The fire sat up straighter, flattered by our attention. The dog yawned the way saints bless. We began the reckoning. 3 knives a pelt, market, formerly the elder, called. 2 loaves of fish, ledger, Einar, replied. For nails a cup ring, Rowan, Fridas, added. Do not, I said to Harold whenever his mouth revved. Women told the most necessary story on earth, bread. How it rises and fails and sulks if you rush it. The grandmothers, seated like generals of the obvious, layered in milk temperatures and how much a good oven likes to be sweet-talked. They had the child in their laps, wrapped in a blanket with a stripe in it like a horizon. He hummed nothing. Good boy. The third note came to the door like a guest trying new manners. It leaned at the bar, considered, and then slid along the beam, hunting a seam in the wood that had once been a tree. The iron nail we'd driven into the lintel made a bright cold there, a thin line the song did not enjoy crossing. Outside, the valley answered itself in pieces. 2 notes from the Hamlet beyond ours. A not note, the name farther down, thinner, like water poured into a furrow. A reply that was numbers. Someone else had had our bright idea or an old one. It moved like a chain of accounts passing along the river, bushels, boots, lengths of twine. Stubborn goats counted twice. The tall shape at our extra chair lifted something we couldn't see and set it down with the authority of a receipt.
When the fire licked higher, we saw it. A smooth black river stone, thumb size, the face scratched with 3 lines. Not runes, not quite. 3 tallies. A ledger with no totals. Return what was borrowed, Einar said under his breath, thrilled in the way scholars get when doom agrees with them.
Or borrow what was returned. Let's try both, I said, because when offered philosophy or action, a village prefers a third thing, chores. We sent a pair to the hill at noon, daylight or not at all, to check the comb. It hung from the rowan branch where Fridas had tied it. Still, as if weather had been told to mind manners. They left there a loaf's heel, a pinch of salt, and a live coal in a safe dish, nothing fancy, just the grammar of gratitude. They spoke no names and came back with cheeks pinked by cold and success. Inside, we built our broadcast. If the third note could run the valley like a rumor, we would run our own rumor right back, a boring liturgy. We cut a dozen reeds to use as whistles, each tuned to a single flat note good for counting, bad for singing. We dug out 2 old ox horns and drilled them for double blasts, never 3. We taught the children a clap pattern that added up to anything but a name. Tonight, I said, if it calls as far as Osterby, we answer with additions and weights from every threshold, not in chorus overlapping. We flood the valley with several. You're weaponizing tedium, Harold said, proud like I'd finally joined his faith. That's my specialty, I said. Bore them out of us. The third note circled our eaves like a hawk. It tried the beam above the hearth. The beam answered with the dry pop Wood uses to say not today. The 2 shapes at the table did a thing I disliked. They relaxed. The tall one leaned back the way a carved man might if someone taught him comfort. The stout one set its hidden hands flat where hands like to be. If they were the kind of guests who learn, we were the kind of hosts who hope learning keeps them polite. The messenger came again, soaked in other people's fear. They set 2 places in Osterby, he said. 2 rings in the ash, 2 chairs, 2 cups. They kept the market inside like you said. They bored the name with taxes. He grinned, mad with relief. It worked. Until the elder asked. Until someone said thank you loud, he said. To nobody. Just have it. The third note wore it like a coat. We all nodded the way people nod when the obvious finally slaps them. Gratitude is answering by another door. New rule, I said. No thank yous. We'll write them down and bury them in spring. The ash bowl by our door kissed itself, SHAPT, and printed a 3rd ring inside the other 2. Not larger, deeper. It made the room feel hollow for a breath, the way a drum feels hollow right before someone finds the skin with a knuckle. Einar turned the Rune-Stone over. It still wore its 3 scratches, no new line. He frowned. 3 is the number they like, he said. 2 notes. 3rd note. 3 rings. 3 lines. Then we lean on 4, I said, because petty is a kind of math. For nails. For corners of iron. For blasts of nothing. We added 2 more iron nails under thresholds like we were feeding a hungry table. We chucked a 4th line across the floor where Frost preferred to stroll. We split our whistles into 4s and taught the children to tap 4 times when they got scared, not 3. The sun dragged itself behind the hill like a tired ox. The market tucked up tight under our roof. Neighbors came with their double-blast horns and their worst-singing voices. The grandmothers took the loft by committee. The dog lay across the door with an air of employment. The 3rd note arrived like a debt. 2 notes first, the kind smile, and then the name, shaped to fit whichever ear forgot its promises. It pressed the roof. It tried the bar. It tasted the word thanks in our mouths and found none. We answered with numbers. Not pretty busy. Horns, 2 blasts from west, 2 from east, 2 from the lane, 2 from the shed. Reeds piped in 1 low flat. Hands clapped 4. Voices listed weights and measures until the room sounded like a ledger in a windstorm. It did something. You could feel the song fail to settle. It's hard to sit on a chair with 4 legs all different lengths. The tall shape made a motion that belonged to men. It rubbed an invisible thumb along an invisible cup's rim twice and did not do it the 3rd time. A courtesy, a rule. The stout shape turned its knot face toward the loft, and every grandmother in that corner turned her attention into a wall. The relief that rolled through us was an insult later. In the moment, we took it. We took it like soup. And then the valley changed key. No name at first. A place not ours spoke itself like a thought said in the right order. The room went thin. The bar felt suddenly like wood, not rule. The Ember hesitated the way courage hesitates when someone knocks like an ancestor. Osterby, the messenger breathed, as if saying it made it smaller. They didn't hold. The third note leaned through the valley like weather, looking for a roof that would let it be bigger than a person. Villages are people in piles. Piles have names whether they like it or not. Many, I told the house, and laid both palms on the bar. I started to count boring. Rafters, pegs, boards that squeak, smoke holes patched, spoons carved by men with no time. Many, many, many. The door did not open. The ash bowl did not print a ring. The beam did not complain. The child upstairs, bless every stripe on his blanket, fell asleep into a snore so honest it should be taxed. For the first time since the song started pretending to be polite, the third note backed off our threshold. Not far, just far enough to make room for a decision. The tall and stout shape stood, not dramatically, like men leaving a table they planned to return to. The bench sighed in a way with sighs when a shift ends. The tall one left the stone. The stout one lifted the nail from the table and set it carefully on the lintel where iron had already bitten wood. A match. A nod. A receipt stamped paid / still owed. They did not vanish. They thinned, like fog choosing distance, and moved toward the door that wasn't opening. The dog did not move. The bar held. Steam curled from the cups, thoughtful. The Rune-Stone pinged once, tiny, like flint agreeing to a truce. We had a plan we liked too much. Bore them. We had a fix we pretended was permanent. Nail the idea outside. We had a valley learning bad habits at good speed. Tomorrow, the elder said, voice sanded to decision, we take the reckoning out. If they're calling villages, we answer as roads. We will be the several between places. Translation, Harold said. We walk. We walk, the elder said. We carry boring like fire. We pass numbers as if they were bread. And if the name finds us on the road? I asked. Then we keep 4, the elder said, tapping nail, corners, coals, his own chest. And we remember that thanks can wait for spring. Outside, the valley breathed the long, cold breath places used to practice being ancient. Inside, the market settled into the half-sleep of people who pretend they're not waiting. The dog kept her job. The Ember didn't apologize for living. For now, the door was a door. And tomorrow, unless someone wiser showed up disguised as mercy, we were going to go teach the path between Hamlets how to count. We left at first light with boredom tacked like rations. The plan was simple the way bridges look simple from the bank. Carry several down the valley and staple it to every door until the song either learned manners or got tired of us. We traveled like a market on legs, horns for 2 blast replies, reed whistles tuned to a single flat one, pockets full of iron nails, chalk for 4th lines, and a lidded pot with the live ember sitting in ash like a small stubborn son. The dog led with the confidence of someone employed by a good god. Behind us, the longhouse breathed like a thing that had decided to remain plural. Snow talked under our boots the way old paper talks when you turn the last page. At the first fence post, we scratched a 4 into the wood 2 crossed 2s, ugly and intentional, and drove a nail below it. Not art, I told the post. Policy. Harold carried the horn and the self-esteem of a man with one job. If it sings, he said, We count until it forgets lyrics. Exactly, I said. Weaponized tedium. We found the first ring at the bend where the sled tracked dogs down toward Osterby, frost printed on a boulder as neat as a coaster. The dog sniffed it and sneezed, which is how she votes no. We chalked a fourth line through the circle, set the ember pot on the rock just long enough to teach it warm, and moved on. The song arrived before Osterby's roofs did 2 notes first, the welcome mat, then the third rolling like a will looking for a rut. It pressed at us side on, like a sheepdog deciding who's in charge of the herd. The road felt thinner. Numbers, I said, and we answered like a badly tuned orchestra. Horns 2, reeds 1, hands 4. Einar recited rope lengths as if the future owed him respect. The grandmother's bread story, carried along by 2 women who walk and talk like looms, spooled out ahead of us, all yeast temperatures and the correct ways to argue with an oven. The song nosed at our words and found no table scraps. Osterby was half standing, people upright, breathing, eyes full of owls. Not dead, not gone, done, the messenger had said. It looked like a village that had been told its true name at the wrong speed and hadn't finished falling to it. We didn't say hello. That's a cousin of thanks. We said prices and weights. 3 knives a pelt. 2 loaves of fish. For nails a cup ring. The road heard us first. Then the porches. Then the people, who blinked as though arithmetic were snow in their lashes and began to wipe it away. At Osterby's main door, we did Einar's risky magic, nailed the idea outside. The elder lifted the iron and drove it through the lintel charm, 3 taps and then a 4th like a signature. Tack, tack, TK, tack. The sound went up the beam and through the roof tiles into a sky that didn't know what to do with 4. The ash bowl there had printed 2 rings already. We chalked a 4th line across them. The dog lay down on the threshold with the dignity of furniture no one moves. Inside, the ember pot sighed and the fire remembered it was a word people say when they mean home. The 3rd note came to test us. It slid between houses, found a seam in a door like a gossip finds noon, and turned toward a woman whose mouth had the memory of thank you hovering behind her teeth. Harold blew 2 blasts so fast he swallowed a fly. The women swapped in flour weights so boring I saw the note flinch. The woman swallowed her gratitude like medicine. The note left looking insulted. Next, I said, because problems have better stamina than men. We walked the center lane and counted the town back into itself. Nails tapped into lintels. Chalk 4s on sills. We hung iron fish over thresholds, tucked rowan twigs under eaves, and told the ovens they were beautiful until they accepted compliments. Wherever we found a ring on stone or wood, we dragged a 4th line through it like a plow teaching dirt its job. The tall and stout shapes kept pace, not close, not far, like 2 patient deaths. They didn't moan. They didn't glow. They occupied. When the fire at Osterby's hall lifted its chin, I saw the tall ones outline the way you see a hand behind thin cloth. The stout one set a small iron nail on the lintel again, that receipt-stamped paid slash still owed. Our elder laid a palm on it. Stay many, he said, and the nail agreed by doing nothing heroic at all. The name tried children next. Of course it did. It came like a mother's voice for supper. The little ones in Osterby had been gathered under blankets, with a grandmother brave enough to knit in a storm. Our 2 grandmothers walked straight in, unfolded the bread story over them, and added the sock story, which has more math than you'd think. The children clapped 4 by accident and fell asleep on purpose. The name had no place to sit. We took the road beyond Osterby, because the 3rd note didn't live in towns, not really. It lived in the between. We were the between. We walked. The valley's chain moved with us. 2 notes from behind, then the third from ahead, then other villages answering in numbers the way rivers answer wind by being water harder. Somewhere far downstream, an entire place said its own name and didn't get up again. I felt the road shiver under us. It knows when a town decides to be one thing too loudly. Midway to the next hamlet, the song tried clever. It didn't use a person. It said the road's name, the one you don't speak unless you're measuring it with a cartwheel and a prayer. The track itself leaned toward being one. The fences on both sides remembered being forest and forgot about being several posts. Count it, the elders said, and we did. We counted posts out loud, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then started over wrong on purpose to make a crowd of numbers. We counted ruts, stones, sparrows, too cold to argue. We counted breaths, ours and the dogs and the embers, which is the breath of coal remembering tree. We counted reasons to be here until the road realized reasons were many, and it relaxed into plural again. At the willow where boys practice being kings, the ring on the root was deeper than the others, like a seat with long memory. We set the ember pot there and told it the entire recipe for fish soup twice without saying delicious even once. The soup forgave us, the ring thinned. Dusk gathered like an audience. We reached the next hamlet to find doors barred, ash bowls printed double, and faces peering through cracks like owls. We did the work again, nails, chalk fours, numbers like rain. The third note crept around the back lane and found me. It didn't throw my name at me this time. It showed it, like a boy carving it on a beam under the table, like my mother stitching it into a shirt where only I would feel it, like my father saying it once with pride and once with fear and once by accident when he meant to say be careful. I felt my mouth reach for the right shape and my throat rehearse gratitude like a fool. The dog bumped my knee with her head so hard I saw a new kind of star. One, I told her, because we'd practiced. One house? No. Many. One ember? No. Many coals. One road? Many steps. I counted my ribs and lost track on purpose. The name looked offended and went to try a fence that hadn't been taught its numbers yet. The messenger caught up breath in pieces, hat regretting his head. Downstream, he said, they're answering with ledgers. They're stacking prices so high the note can't see people. Good, I said. Tell them to add boring to boil. And no thanks till spring. We stayed the night outside, camped where the road splits the meadow, because the between is where the third note grows fat. We planted 4 iron nails in the dirt at the corners of our little square of stubborn, chalked a 4 on a flat stone for the fire to admire, and lifted the ember into a proper flame without asking it nicely. The shapes, tall and stout, stood at the edge of our light like trees that only learned how to be men last week. Parley, the elder said to them as if words made tables. We feed what has a mouth. We refuse what needs an answer. We carry many. One night, one road, no names, no songs, no twice. Steam curled from 2 cups we had not poured. They set themselves in the air and then decided to be polite. They came to rest on the wagon board we had laid level as a rule. The ash pan at the camp edge kissed itself, SHAPT, and printed a 3rd ring we crossed with a 4th line before it finished being proud. Then the valley changed manners. The 3rd note drew itself tall as a mountain and spoke a place that wasn't a village and wasn't a person. It spoke the river. You could hear frost deciding to break. Water answers names differently than wood. Count stones, I said. Count bends, Einar said. Count fords, the grandmothers said. Count reasons we don't drown tonight, Harold said, and for once he wasn't trying to be funny. We stood by that dark ribbon and told it everything we knew about it. Where it slows, where it lies, where it steals sheep if you let it. We told it our measures, arm spans, boot lengths, the weight of a bucket when it's pretending to be light. We bored the river until it remembered it was many eddies and stones and fish and cold, and not one big throat to swallow names. Something let go, not us the note.
It leaned back from the bank like a thought that had lost its verb. And then the price for our cleverness arrived. Osterbai's name tried to stand up inside our mouths at once, as if the valley had decided to ring us like a bell and hear which clapper we were. The elder's knees remembered age. The dog went very still in the way dogs do when they choose job over
Over fear. In my pocket, the black stone we'd been gifted suddenly felt warm, the scratches on its face, 3 tallies, itching like they were about to vote. For I said to the stone, to the road, to the river, to the cups, to the shapes, to the beam of the sky that can't help wanting to be a roof. We keep 4. The ember brightened as if someone had remembered its birthday. The horn gave 2 blasts without being asked. The reeds answered 1 flat. Hands 4. The note, disgusted with fractions, went looking for easier math. Behind me, a child's laugh lifted out of sleep like a skylark, ours, carried on memory and blanket stripes and a grandmother's hand. It hit the first note by accident. The village as a whole held its breath like a bad idea. The laugh stopped on its own, rolled into a snore, and the world decided to be kind for a beat. The tall shape stepped forward as if to test our square of nails. The stout one set its invisible hand on the lintel nail we'd driven into a cart's yoke for lack of a door and gave the tiniest, most infuriatingly human nod. The Rune-Stone back home must have heard, because somewhere in my coat the black stone pinged, not sound, not light, just a little rightness against the palm. I turned it over in the fireglow. The face that had worn 3 lines now showed a 4th, shallow and fresh, as if the valley itself had finally remembered what comes after 3. The line wasn't straight. It hooked at the end like a question. Receipt, Einar breathed, delighted against good sense. Or a truce. We did not say thank you. We did not say hello. We didn't answer anything. We stirred the stew. We named weights. We told a sock how to be a sock, and we watched the road learn to be several long enough for the night to loosen its grip. Just before dawn, when the dark is bored and the light is still dressing, the 3rd note tried one more trick. It came not as a sound at all, but as quiet, the illegal kind, from every fence post, from every roof beam, from the breath of every neighbor strung to ours. It wanted us to drop the numbers and listen to 1. We listened to many instead. To shallow water over stones, to the dog's nose doing inventory, to the little hiss a coal makes when it remembers tree, to a grandmother's dry cough, to Harold muttering prices in his sleep like a man dreaming of becoming a ledger. The quiet couldn't find a single throat to wear. It moved on, offended. Dawn pushed a thumb under the horizon and pried the day open. Far down valley, a horn answered 2. Farther, a reed piped 1. Our hands, chapped and certain, found 4 without looking. Osterbai's doors stayed plural. Our longhouse, somewhere behind us, stayed several. The river sulked itself into being water. We had not one. That isn't how valleys work. But the road had learned to count, and for one long morning, that was enough to keep names from deciding us. Morning arrived like a receipt, thin, undeniable, and signed by frost. The road behind us had learned to count. Osterbai's doors were still plural. The river sulked itself into being water instead of one giant throat. That would have been a good ending if valleys liked tidy endings. They don't. Valleys like arrangements. We walked home in a column of several, carrying the ember like a quiet opinion and the black river stone in my pocket, now with 4 tallies on its face, and the little hook at the end like a question mark that didn't want to start a fight. The longhouse exhaled when it saw us, a draft under the door you could mistake for relief. Inside, the market smelled like leather, smoke, and people who had tried very hard not to be one thing. The dog checked our knees for inventory and sat down on the threshold with the authority of a promoted employee. The goat had eaten half the Juniper charm again and looked smug about it. We reappointed her director of sabotage and moved on. We called a meeting, which, by now, means a lot of people standing near a fire pretending they're not listening for a note. The elder rolled his shoulders like a man trying to settle the armor of age. "Last night we kept a road," he said. "Tonight we keep a house again. And then we decide what to keep for winter and what to keep for always." Einar held the old Rune-Stone in his palm. It still showed 3 scratches on the underside, stubborn as scripture. The black river stone in my coat had 4, fresh, shallow, hooked at the end like a promise you can't make yet. Between them sat the comb, tied to the rowan on the hill, and the nail on our lintel, memory and fix. If tokens were a language, it felt like we were almost speaking in sentences. "Parley holds," I said. "One roof, many people, one extra chair we admit on purpose, our seat, not a hole. Cups face down unless we turn them. Iron in the corners, for lines where frost likes to stroll. Numbers in the mouth. And we don't say thank you till spring." "Add one more," the elder said. "3 belongs to them, for we made our own. Tonight, if we must have a new number, let it be 5. 5 is for the living. Because there were 5 at my table when my first boy was born," Friedis said, shrugging like she hadn't just written scripture. "And because 5 fingers make a hand. Good enough. We build law out of smaller reasons all the time." We rearranged the room to look like plural you could trip over. Odd benches, mismatched threads on cups, nails tucked into 4 corners, and 1 extra nail laid flat on the sill like a reminder that we choose our tools. The grandmothers sharpened their bread story and added an annex about socks for good measure. The children practiced a clap that went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then lost count on purpose and giggled until the rules felt like furniture. Dusk came in the way drums come back after a bridge. The Ember stood up inside the hearth like a decent man at a wedding. The dog made herself heavy across the door. The ash bowl by the threshold did not kiss. Steam did not curl from nowhere. For a full minute the room was only a room. Then the song arrived to check our math. 2 notes first, polite as a host who hates lateness. Then the third, that not note that had learned to be a name when it wanted to be. It pressed all the usual places, the bar, the beam, whatever corner in a man thinks it's time to be singular. Our iron held, our chalkboard, our mouths did their jobs. "Prices," the elder barked. We gave the valley arithmetic until it wanted a nap. Ropes by cubits, hides by hands, bread by weights, stew by bowls, boots by pairs you could keep your toes in. The grandmothers droned yeast temperatures like rivers, and the child, who had earned an early bedtime and a medal, snored actual plural. The bar leaned and reconsidered. The ash bowl kissed once, SHAPT, and printed a ring. Before it could think a second thought, I drew a 4th line through it, and Friedis tapped the lintel 5 times with her knuckles, soft, human, unreasonable. Tack, 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 tack. The room had the nerve to believe in us. Steam rose from 1 cup we turned on purpose. The extra chair creaked, relieved to be correct. The 2 places in the room with edges, the tall and the stout, took shape the way patience takes shape, by occupying time. They sat without owning. If this was a test, it was also a lesson. A seat is a place, not a person. The 3rd note tried gratitude again. the noose with lace on it. Harold's mouth opened on have it and closed on policy. He coughed numbers instead, then whispered to me, "If I live, I'm thanking bread in April until it sues me." I said, "Good. The court is spring." The name came for me one last time, not as a voice, but as a memory of a voice. The way my mother dropped it into the yard to call me in. The way my father hung it on a nail in the shed when there was work. The way boys wrote it where wood wouldn't tattle. It felt like a cup rim pressed into my ribs. I put my hand on the bar. "One house," I said, softly enough that the valley had to lean. "No, many." I counted 5 we could prove. 1 ember, 2 cups turned by our hands, 3 tokens we understand, comb, nail, stone, 4 corners ironed, 5 the people in my line of sight, Elder, Friedis, Harold, Einar, and the dog, who is a people when it matters. The name found no throat to live in. It waited, the way weather waits. Waiting is a kind of pressure. So we gave the valley the lowest form of resistance we own. We bored it. We priced needles.
We recited the lengths of sled runners. We listed the month's fish sulk. We told the oven it was beautiful until it blushed and behaved. Our horn gave 2 where needed, our reeds 1, our hands 4, and when the room almost remembered how to be 1, we clapped 5 like we meant it. The tall shape lifted its cup.
The stout one set something on the table that wasn't there until we had the right light. A second nail, old and honest, laid gently on the inside of the lintel, next to the first, which lived outside. Fix outside. Fix inside. We understood, both. The Rune-Stone pinged a bright, tiny agreement you could miss if you weren't waiting for it your whole life. Einar turned it over in his palm and smiled in a way that meant trouble and relief had decided to share a bench. On the underside a 4th scratch had appeared thin, crooked, like a boy's first try at a new letter. The old men pretended not to wipe their eyes. Terms, the elder said into the room, into the guests, into the rafters that had learned our names and kept them as wood instead of hooks. We keep market under one roof. We feed what has a mouth. We refuse what needs an answer. No names. No songs. No twice. 1 extra seat we set on purpose, for memory not possession. You leave before first cock. You take your cups and your cold. You leave our many with us. The tall shape inclined the way men do when the price is fair. The stout one's not face turned toward the loft where sleep did the decent thing and held. For a long breath all of us were furniture, table, bench, beam, dog, people. Then, without moan or drama, the guests thinned the way fog chooses distance. The bench sighed like a back after work. Steam unwound from the air and forgot it had ever been a reason to fear. The ash bowl didn't print a ring. The bar didn't move. The ember licked once at the log, pleased. Someone made the mistake of almost saying thank, and the entire village tackled the word and tied it to April with red thread. We will bury our thanks by the rowan when the thought lets us be sentimental without being stupid. We did not cheer. Cheering is a kind of answering. We ate instead, which is how we praise the living. The bread story sounded like liturgy again instead of armor. The sock story grew 3 inches because children do. Harold knocked his knuckles 5 times on the table and said, "Working." It is the best prayer he knows. Later, when the house remembered how to be house and not theater, we fixed the outside and the inside the way the nail asked. We left 1 nail in the lintel charm and 1 on it. We left the comb on the hill with bread's heel, salt's pinch, and 1 coal kept alive on purpose. We kept the Black River stone with its 4 and its little hook question. We did not add a 5th line. 5 is for us, not for stones. Down valley, Word traveled the other way for once. Villages hammered nails into lintels and promises into each other. The river remembered being water. The road remembered it was made of steps. Once, late in winter, the chain of two notes drifted up the valley and tried to stand on its third. We answered with two, one, four, and that soft human five that belongs to hands holding other hands. Whatever wanted to be one decided to be patient instead. And now? Now the market is market. The longhouse is longhouse. The dog has a job title I can't pronounce without smiling. The goat still eats the juniper because empires rise and goats persist. We keep the rules not because we're frightened, but because good rules are furniture. You use them, and they make your life less drafty. Sometimes at night, when the wind is bored and the fire has opinions, if you press your ear to the biggest beam and listen like a thief, you'll hear two notes from very far away. If you wait for the third, you won't hear it here. Not anymore. It's busy somewhere else, making weather out of people who haven't learned to count in public. If you want to know what you should do then, the advice is boring enough to keep you alive. Lay iron in the corners. Draw a fourth line where frost prefers to walk. Turn the cups over yourself. Feed what has a mouth. Refuse what needs an answer. Keep one ember rude and bright. Clap 5 when your throat forgets its job. Save thanks for spring. And if two polite strangers ever sit at your table, remember, some guests are just memory with good manners. Offer bread that remembers the sun. Do not offer your name. As for the cup in the museum in Bergen years from now, if you stand very still and the guard looks away, you might hear it ring twice in the glass. You'll wait for 3. It won't come. Somewhere far off a carpenter will tap a lintel 4 times just to feel better. You will count your fingers 5 and decide to go home. We didn't win. Valleys don't do victories. We did something harder. We made a truce we can live with, and then we lived.